Good morning. This is part 3 of the full story of Jehovah's Witnesses' judicial system. I'd got to the part where elders X and Y had promised to go to people they had involved in this matter and to say to them that I was not a slanderer. About a year later, I discovered that they hadn't done as they'd promised because it caused me some problems. So Elder X said to me there was absolutely no need for him to inform anybody I wasn't a slanderer because that was obvious. I hadn't been disfellowshipped. Well, I met with X and Y again and they apologised again and I wrote another letter. And I thought, that's it, that's the end of the problems. But we come to 2009 and person A, that's the name I will give this person, one of the ones who had nothing to say at my judicial hearing. This person had held a grudge for 5 years that I had not been disfellowshipped, and it was like a volcano waiting to go off, and it did go off in April of 2009. Person A discussed the matter with the elders, and then he telephoned me and stated, "You are a slanderer, they just let you off." I said, well, that's news to me. I had 2 elders calling to my home and they said the same thing. You were a slanderer, they just let you off. I met an elder in the street and he said the same thing. Well, the accusations continued and it was making me ill. So I did go to my solicitor and he wrote that letter, which I showed you before, in which he stated it was against the Constitution and it was tantamount to defamation. So on May the 8th, I went to my solicitor to see had we had any response to his letter. And he said that person A had contacted him by telephone and had been quite threatening. So the solicitor had to put the telephone down. I was so traumatized by this because I didn't pay my solicitor enough to deal with threatening phone calls. I got back to my car and I had to sit there for an hour before I could move. That night, I woke up at 3 a.m. My heart was all over the place. I phoned the emergency doctor and he wanted to come out and see me, but I was living in a shed at the time, so it wasn't suitable. So I said, look, I'll come down to you. It was only 2 miles down the road. He laid me out on the bench and attached all these wires. And then he tried to get a pulse. And I could hear him panicking. I can't get a pulse. I can't get a pulse. Well, I saw the funny side of that. And I said, if you can't get a pulse, I must be dead. And I laughed. And that was just enough to get the heart going, it seems. I had atrial fibrillation. The doctor said that there were no consultants at the weekend. He said for me to go home and stay in bed until Monday when my GP would get me into hospital. Now that saved my life because if it had been a weekday, the doctor would have put me in the ambulance and the journey to the hospital was an hour and a half. My blood pressure was on the floor anyway, and I wouldn't have survived the journey. So I got back in my car. I tried to drive and I couldn't. My blood pressure was too low. So I sat there for ages and I must have recovered a little bit. I got a coffee from a shop which had just opened across the road. And that was enough to be able me to get down to my GP who had a surgery on a Saturday. It was only a few yards down the road. He got me into the local hospital and that started the rest of the year, me being in and out of departments of the hospitals from outpatients. But I still had this problem of the accusations continuing. So I got my solicitor to write another letter. And I'm going to read you this part where my solicitor writes to them and says that he'd received extracts from me of the Watchtower of August the 15th, 1997, and other extracts from their religious books, and she feels that the elders in her local community did not follow procedure before having her brought before them to answer accusations of slander. So you see, at that time, I still believed this is not the religion's fault. These men are acting on their own agenda. They are totally incompetent. So I couldn't blame the religion. They were going against Watchtower Society rules, so I believed. But that actually was not the case. But I didn't find that out for another 10 years. So the next story is what happened next. Thank you.